welcome everyone to this wonderful session with the Dope News, which is an online magazine targeting some of the key players in the industry across the board: hospitality stakeholders, tour operators, travel designers, and also the head of tourism departments and head of tourism organization and boards to create content and value for the work that can be done for promoting tourism in a very sustained and in a very responsible manner. We do learn a lot from the way tourism is promoted in various countries, and which is why to have Brent Hill here from Fiji Tourism Board. It's interesting to note that Brent has been he headed marketing for the South Australian Tourism Board for a very long time, and the pre-pandemic numbers really are a testimony to the fact of his talent in marketing a destination, which of course is a very different thing than to market a hotel or a particular tour itinerary. I think. Welcome on board, Brent. In this series, we would like to highlight 5 destinations, and Fiji is one of the chosen ones, because I think with the kind of landscape you have for tourism and the kind of potential that you have for tourism, which also very directly works through the landscape of the beautiful country. I think you have the wherewithal for a fantastic tourism opportunity, while you also have to be very careful, which is why it is perfect subject for what we set out for World Tourism Day. Welcome on board.
Thank you.
Great. So to begin with, would you like to tell us something about Fiji, the country in general?
Yeah, so Fiji is in the South Pacific. So it's about a 3.5 hour flight from Sydney. And it's made up of over 330 islands. About half of those are inhabited. So just under 1 million people. But, it's very much known as, a paradise. Most days are, 26 to 30 degrees, and the water is beautiful and clear and warm. So it is a very beautiful place.
Fantastic. And which means, so your tourism is all the whole year, is all year around, right? And people generally come for the beaches.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, from that sort of perspective, sustainability and climate are really important to Fiji, because we are vulnerable to climate change. So we do have a period where we get more extreme weather, like around January, February, and that used to be only like every few years, maybe once every 10 years, whereas we get a little bit more extreme weather now more regularly. But on the whole, for at least a good 10, 11 months of the year, Fiji is incredible. It's a beautiful place to come and stay and relax, and we have some of the best tourism experiences in the world.
Fantastic. And so when you say extreme weather conditions, are we talking about cold, heat, rains?
More like cyclones. So
yes, yeah, because
of the... So we can get wind probably sort of every 5 to 10 years. We used to get a cyclone, but now it's a little bit more regular with climate change. So Fiji is very interested in the efforts around the world to tackle climate change, because we rely on it. We most people come to Fiji to experience our climate, to get in the ocean and those kinds of things. So it's really important.
One of the things about marketing varied landscapes, something that's got. I mean, you've got the islands, and you've got the islands, and you've got the volcanoes, and then you've got the tropical forest, and of course the coastline. Does it allow you to specifically market a certain portion to a target audience, to a target customer from a specific country?
Most people around the world come to Fiji thinking about beautiful sand, coconut palms, incredible blue water, very clear. So that's what most people come for. But the thing that's really exciting is that there are more and more people now that are starting to come to do things like, trekking in the hinterland. So they're going up through some of the mountain ranges, and there's a number of things you can do in rivers now as well. So you can do things like whitewater rafting and river tubing and these kinds of things. So it's exciting to sort of see that the more adventure type products. And I think the good thing is most adventure tourists who come wanting to do a bit of adventure, they're quite interested in sustainability. So it's a really good place to be.
Fantastic. And there is also a certain cultural element, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in Fiji, that's a really important piece that, the Fijian population are some of the friendliest in the world. They're so open and welcoming, but, we still have a lot of traditional cultural elements. So things like, you can't just walk up a mountain and climb around. You have to actually get permission from the chief of the village if there's a village there. Yeah. And things like the river rafting will often go past a lot of the villages. So they normally will have arrangements with the villages. But the great thing about it is the Fijian culture does come through when you holiday here. But that's something that I'm really focused on. That when you leave Fiji, I want Fiji to make an imprint on your heart, and so that you go away with an understanding of the beautiful and wonderful Fijian culture.
And so Fiji culture would be in the way they live as communities. It would be in the cuisine, and also in probably the festivals and their textiles and crafts and things like that. Yeah. So does it?
Correct. And things like dress. You come to Fiji, it's hard not to see somebody. Often, at the hotels, for example, they might have warriors who come and light the torches. You might even see performances. So they'll Fijians sing a lot, which is a beautiful thing. So you might get sung to when you arrive or when you leave the hotel. And of course, things like ceremonies and so on. So it's really important that when people come to Fiji that they want to embrace that culture and learn about that culture.
Great. And how does this play up as experiences for travelers? I mean.
So a lot of travelers, a lot of the experiences have got things like you can go and visit a village as part of the experience. So if you go on a cruise, for example, through some of the islands, the boat will actually stop at the island and you'll be able to get off and actually go and visit that village, and they might actually do a performance for you, or you might go and see how they're involved in some of their traditional craft making, or if you're really lucky, they might share a kava bowl with you, which is a drink that you can drink together as a form of community. So I think the key thing about coming to Fiji is you're very likely to see Fijian culture. Just the main thing is to be really respectful of that, to talk to people about what it's like and then embrace it and learn from it.
Let's look at the architecture. So are there any traditional architecture that have been imbibed into building hotels? Is there? Yeah. That would be interesting to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this part of it, actually. It's beautiful. So the traditional Fijian house is called a bure, like B-U-R-E, bure. And a bure is traditionally made with like a thatched roof and woven coconut palm, edges around it. So many of the hotels that you'll see around Fiji are built in that traditional style. So they're beautiful. They look incredible. You also can often see it in your house. So the house that I live in, for example, has a thatched roof and has a big bure entrance. So the architecture here in Fiji is very minimalist. It's not like a big high-rise everywhere. There is a lot of this. So a lot of the hotels that are built in that sort of style. So even the most luxurious and high-end resorts are built in that bure style, which is wonderful.
Great. And which is even in the city, even the city hotels, or do you have the usual, chrome and steel city hotels, or is this general?
Yeah, in the city hotels, you get a little bit of, the sort of same that you see around the world, but there's also the British colonial influence. So just like you see in India, for example, when you stay in some of the, Raj hotels and things like that, you see that British colonial influence, we have a bit of that here. So, for example, in Shoba, which is the capital city, there's the Grand Pacific Hotel, and it looks like hotels that you see in Sri Lanka and in India. It's very, very similar. So there is a bit of diversity, I guess, in that architecture.
Your biggest market would be Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah, Australia and New Zealand. Yeah,
New Zealand and the US.
US is third, and then China.
And
you know, we were seeing some growth out of India also, which was great. So we're hoping to rebuild that, because Indians can travel via Singapore, so they can come India to Singapore and then straight to Fiji, which is really convenient.
Convenient, and also there's an Indian diaspora in Fiji.
Very much so. About half of the population are, I guess, what is called Indian Fijian. So for me personally, because I love India, I have travelled there before a few times and really love it. It's amazing because you get some of the best curries in the world, and you get some of that beautiful sort of Indian influence come through. So there's lots of Hindi, there's lots of temples, lots of elements like that. But of course, one thing that you have to remember is some of the people that were Indian Fijian might be like third generation Indian Fijian. So their connection with India, the country, is only slim. Or some of them may have never ever been to India, or don't have even family in India that they know of. So it's quite an interesting culture. They've sort of created their own culture here.
Landscape, or they are farmers and craft people, right? This is their livelihoods are largely farming, just like India. I mean, like rural India is all about farming and agriculture. Is Fiji also largely agri-based and fishing?
Yeah, so tourism is incredibly important. Tourism is virtually number one, really. So it's 40 to 45% of the GDP comes from tourism. Yeah. And then you have things like agriculture, sugar, fishing, etc. Some of those more traditional ones. And there are things like manufacturing and so on that is growing, which is good. But tourism is incredibly important to Fiji. So that's why COVID's been so difficult, because it's really impacted on jobs. Yeah.
When we talk about sustainability or responsible tourism, especially in a landscape like this, is a small country, a large portion of it, almost half of it is the economy is based on tourism.
That's right. So yeah, it's incredibly important, and the government is very outspoken about the need for sustainable practices around the world, and leading a lot of commentary, often in our area in Oceania, about climate change, and we really push Australia and some of those bigger countries to do their role and play their role when it comes to climate change, because obviously Fiji's is a tiny dot in the ocean, really, in the whole scheme of things. So we're very reliant on those other countries to help us, because things like rising sea levels are an issue. So when it comes to what we do from a tourism perspective and working with the government, there's a couple of things. So often the Fijian government, through a super fund, actually owns the land, which is great. So when people come and stay, the money goes back into that super fund, and then that's effectively securing the country in terms of economic perspective. Coral farming and turtle conservation, manta ray conservation, all of those kinds of things. So lots of elements around marine, and really pushing marine. So I think there's work still to be done. So things like reduction in plastic and reduction in waste and recycling. There's still some work to be done in that space, but we're certainly working hard on that.
And these policies came into perspective very recently, or the government is, already cognizant of the perils of tourism badly done? I mean, have there been much before you came?
I would say probably the last 5 to 10 years, Fiji's really been very vocal on things like climate change, because they can see the impact. So as I said before, more severe weather, rising sea levels, so things like that, where that does impact on us as a tourism destination and on people's livelihoods. So there are literally a couple of islands in Fiji that are quite low lying that they've had to move. So some things like that. We are at the front end of climate change to some degree.
Community, the local people in various islands and things. So you said that they have the last word in permissions and things like that, which kind of automatically takes care of carrying capacities. But how does money go back into the community? Apart from the larger fund that you have created, how does it go back in the hands of? So do they have homestays? Do they run hotels? Does the community directly impact from tourism?
Yeah, so probably the biggest area is in employment. That's probably the major one. So in a lot of cases, when people come to Fiji, they want to travel to remote areas and beautiful islands, and so the resorts that use those islands will use a lot of the villages for staff. So, for example, just off the coast here in Nandi, which is where the main international airport is, there's a number of islands, and they have a lot of villages on those islands. A lot of the people there are employed in all of those resorts. So there's also the villages benefit when something's built on their land. So, for example, probably the biggest one is a village that's not far from here, where the airport was built on their land. So the airport pays royalties to the village, and then the village is able to use that money in certain ways to benefit the community as a whole. So look, it's not perfect, but there's lots of good things that are being done here in Fiji.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the most important thing. And if we kind of start looking at skilling them, I mean, skill development, and also getting them to understand, and practice some of these things. I mean, training is very, very important. So our communities are trained together, though they might not be in the line of direct tourism benefits. Are they trained towards sustainable measures, towards participating in the cultural, in upholding cultural aspects? Is there that sense of pride in what they have that they'd like to share with travelers?
There's certainly a pride in Fijian culture. I think that's a really strong thing. So preservation of language, preservation of traditional dress, things like the turtle, for example. The turtle is protected, it's sacred. So you can't hunt a turtle, for example, and there's quite detailed elements around things like ownership. So, for example, and I actually experienced this the other day. So, a turtle actually, unfortunately, died, and it washed up onto a sandbank, and people sort of gathered around looking at the turtle, but a local villager was able to claim the turtle and take the turtle back to their village because it's theirs, because it connects to their waters. So I think in that sense, there is a good sense of training and upskilling and opportunities, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about working in tourism is there are genuine opportunities for people to get employment and to better their circumstances and to help out on little things around their community.
Coming to marine ecosystems and forests, so what are the measures that are generally taken to ensure corals can go completely haywire? The coral life can go haywire with constant movement into the sea. So what's the language that you use? I mean, what is the advice that is given even before the travelers, and how do you integrate it with marketing? Now, this is the tricky thing because I battle it all the time. So how do you put this out as a awareness building campaign?
Yeah, so when I was in South Australia, we did a lot of campaigning around things like leave only footprints or take more than you bring. So the idea was that you actually would take rubbish off beaches and things like that and play your role. And I think a lot of people come to Fiji and appreciate how beautiful it is, and then they want to make sure we want to appeal to them and say, well, make sure it's that beautiful for generations to come. So even little things we've started to bring into it is things like just awareness around things like sunscreen, the fact that, sunscreen
absolutely
impact on coral. So we're advising people that, which type of sunscreen to choose if they're going to go snorkeling, so that it doesn't harm the reef. And certainly things like, not treading on the reef and, things like fishing, making sure that, the fish go back and Yeah, there's certainly lots of things that we try and communicate to the tourists before they get here. That Fiji is a place that is very vulnerable to change in environmental and sustainability issues. So it's something that's very important and close to our heart.
Brilliant, because it's very fragile. I mean, it sounds like a very, very fragile ecosystem.
It is. It is.
Yeah. And so what does a typical itinerary look like when somebody's, I mean, if a general traveler is going to, if a leisure traveler is going to Fiji, what does a typical itinerary look like?
So a lot of people come to Fiji and they'll want to stay at a resort for like a week. So if they pick a resort and they stay at that resort for a week, they've got, all the activities that you can imagine in a big resort. So, big pools and, amazing food and performances and so on. But what we're trying to encourage people to do as well is not just fly and flop, as it were, like to actually get out and experience Fiji. So, part of that is, getting out on the water, potentially doing a cruise or going snorkeling, going surfing, playing golf, these kinds of things. And also increasingly more, as I said before, doing things like getting out on the river and going for treks and really appreciating Fiji for what it is, because it's not an urban jungle. It's a real paradise. But I think as COVID has come along, that's given some challenges as well, because normally we would say go into a village and experience true Fijian life, but that can be a little difficult. So we're trying to vaccinate as many of the local population as possible and doing really well at that. So probably by early October, we'll be 80% fully vaccinated in Fiji, which is incredible. And that means that the locals are kept safe.
Fantastic. And when you say if you'll be 80% vaccinated, does it discount some of the places as islands so that it can be out of bounds? And the main key areas where tourism goes, those people will be 80% vaccinated, right?
Yes.
Is that,
it is, but there's also the tourism industry has also played a really big role. Like, for example, we've got cruise boats that go around the islands, and a lot of those cruise boats have actually taken vaccines out to some of those outer islands to make sure that the villages and the
smaller villages
get access to vaccine.
Fantastic, great. And are you all? Is Fiji open for tourism now? Are people started to come? Not yet.
Not just yet. We're planning for December. So in December we should be open to fully vaccinated travellers can come to Fiji, and we will welcome them again. It's really important for us.
Yeah, and also Australia being your key market, I think Australia is looking at December as their when they're going to ease restrictions, right? So that's great. Brent, is there anything else you want to talk about, which is the highlight of Fiji? It sounds like an incredible destination. I don't know of anywhere else where you can find volcanoes and tropical forests and riverine ecosystems, as well as a beautiful coastline.
Yeah, look, it is. It's an amazing destination. It's definitely got something for everybody in terms of you can go as luxurious as you want, but you can also go inexpensively. So, I would encourage Indians to think about coming out here to Fiji. They're going to see some things that will look very familiar, but they're also going to experience an amazing culture and a beautiful, warm place that is home to the happiest people on earth. So it's a good place to come.
It's a good place to come. Just one thing before we end. Is there, has destination weddings become popular in the Fiji Islands? Is that a...
Definitely. They are, it's huge.
It's a huge
a lot of big Indian weddings.
Wow. And are there any indigenous brands in Fiji? I mean, local businessmen who started hotels or restaurant chains?
I think most people around the world probably know this one, Fiji Water.
Okay. Yes,
right?
I do.
Most people have probably seen that, but there's also a brand called Pure Fiji, which is a skincare brand. There's South Sea Salts, which is a salt brand, and lots of things around things like shirts and garments and so on that are Fijian. So slowly but surely, Fiji is doing really well. There's a lot of that artisan type product, which is great.
Yeah, no, I mean in the hotel. I mean, do you have any indigenous hotel brands?
In the hotel space, no. Mostly it's the large brands, but the advantage, I guess, is the large brands are buying the land from Fijians, so the royalties and the rent go back to Fiji, which is great. That's the important part.
Okay, and what are the more famous brands that have resorts?
The more famous, so we have like Six Senses Fiji, we have Marriott Mummy Bay, we have a Shangri-La, Sofitel, Westin, Hilton, all the really big brands, but we have a lot of boutique luxury brands also. So some of those are partnerships with locals. So you can have islands like Kokomo and Fomo and Lathala, which are these incredible, beautiful private islands that are part owned by
local people. Oh, that's fine. I mean, that's the kind of thing I really like when promoting tourism in sensitive destinations. That's great. Great listening to you, Brent. That was a great insight into tourism in Fiji. And I know that it is quite a challenge. And I'm sure with your marketing expertise, you must be bringing not only information and knowledge about the country, but also how people can travel responsibly into Fiji and kind of take away more than what they would leave behind, both in terms of garbage and things like that, and also a bit of the culture, which is again very important when we talk about travel as a means of transformation.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate your interest in Fiji.
Thank you so much, Brent.